Hi guys, this is a beginner's tutorial on 3 handy JavaScript functions which I find super useful when you are working with arrays in JavaScript. Since this is a beginner's level tutorial, if you have recently started with JavaScript or arrays in JavaScript, hopefully this is going to help you. So the 3 functions or methods that I will be talking about are the filter method, the map method, and the reduce method. Just a heads up, I will be using Node.js to compile and run my code. If you don't have Node.js, that should not be a problem for this tutorial, as I will show you an alternate way to write and test your code. So the first handy function on our list is the filter function. What it does is basically it filters out elements of an array based on a specific condition that's provided by you. Now, how do we do that? Let's create a new file and let's call it filter.js. And let's say we have an array of numbers that looks like this: 6, 7, and let's say 3. And let's say we want to filter out the number 3 from this array. Now, how do we do that? We can use the for loop, but it will be consisted of 3, 4, or 5 lines, which we can simply replace by using the filter function in just one line. So how do we do that? We'll say const filtered numbers, and you will call the filter function on the numbers array like this, and you will get access to each element of the array, and you can define your condition here by saying element not equals to 3. Now, if you print out this variable filtered numbers, you will see this array without the number 3. Now I am going to access my terminal from here. If you are using VS Code, I think the keyboard shortcut is Command-Shift-M, but I like to use this one. Now we will execute this JavaScript file by saying node filter.js, and when we press enter, we see this array does not have the number 3 in it. So that's how you can simply filter out the elements that you don't need from an array. You can do this with an array of JSON objects as well. So let's say you have an array with some user details, and this array contains JSON objects with some key value pairs. So we've got ID as 1. Let's call this user David, and let's give him an age of 25. And similarly, we have another object with ID2. We give it another name and a different age. And similarly, one more JSON object. You call it George, and we'll give him the age of 31. Now, if we want users from this array with age greater than 25, we can again run a for loop, but that's going to be rather clunky. So what we'll do is that we'll say const filtered users equals to details filter, and again it will give us access to each of the JSON object within the array, and we'll say we want users only where the age is greater than 25. Now if we print this variable, we should see only these two JSON objects where the age is greater than 25. Let's run this file again by saying node filter.js, and as you can see, it's got an array of 2 objects with age greater than 25. Now if we want to filter out the users where the age is less than or equals to 25. We just need to do that, and if we run this file again, we'll see that it returns an array with this object where the age is 25. Now, if you don't have Node.js installed, you can simply use your browser's developer tools to run this same piece of code. So we will copy this and we will right click in our Chrome, click on inspect, go to console and paste. And if you hit enter, you will see the same output as you saw in the terminal. So that's the filter method. Now, the second function that I want to talk about is the map function. This function gives you access to each individual element of your array and allows you to perform an operation on that element. Now, let's create another JavaScript file and let's call it map.js, and let's use the same array that we used in the filter example. Now let's say you want to multiply each of these numbers by 2. Now how you would do that is by saying numbers.map, and it will again give you access to each of the numbers, and you can say you want to multiply each number by 2, and if you print out the output, it should multiply each of these numbers by 2. Now we'll clear this, we'll run the map file, and as you can see that it's multiplied 1 by 2 to give us 2, it's multiplied 2 by 2 to give us 4, and so on. So that's the map function. Again, if you don't have Node.js installed, all you need to do is just copy this and paste it in your browser, and you can see that it gives you the same output. Finally, the third function on our list is the reduce function. This is a little different than map and filter functions. Unlike the other two, reduce returns a single value instead of an array. This method runs a provided function on each element of your array, and the returned value of that function is stored in a variable, normally called accumulator or result, to be then made available for the following execution of that function. There are two parts to using this function. First part is to write a reducer function, which you then pass to the JavaScript reduce method. Let's give it a try to understand it better. We'll create a new file and we'll call it reduce.js, and let's define an array of numbers by saying numbers equals to 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now let's say I want to add each of these numbers, like 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4. How I do that is, so first we will define our reducer function, and it will take two parameters, accumulator and the current value of the array, and it's up to us to do whatever we want to do with each of these elements. I am only going to add each of these numbers from left to right, so I would say return accumulator plus current value. Now let's debug this function a little bit to see what the accumulator and current value variables hold when we run this function. So I will print the accumulator value, and similarly I will print the current value, and we'll return the addition of these two. And finally we'll call the JavaScript reduce method on our array by saying numbers.reduce, and we will pass it our reducer function. And that's all we need to do. And if we print out the output, it should give us one value, which should be equals to 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4, which is 10. First of all, let's clear this and let's run our reduce.js file. And as you can see, the first time this function ran, it had the accumulator value of 1, which is the first element of our array. And the value of current value variable was 2, which is the second value of our array. Now, if you use the reduce method like this, the accumulator parameter holds the first value of the array, and the current value parameter will hold the second value of the array. If you want to provide an initial value, and if you do not want the accumulator to use the first value of the array, you can do so by passing the number here. In this case, it will set the value of accumulator parameter as 5, and the current value parameter will be set to 1. Now, if we see the output of this function, it gives us 10. And if we provided an initial value of 5 and run the same file again, it gives us the value of 15. As you can see here, the accumulator's initial value was 5. It was not 1 this time because we provided the initial value here like this, and the current value was 1. Now the second time it ran, after we added the accumulator plus current value, the accumulator was holding the value 6, and the current value was holding number 2, which when added gives us 8, which then became the accumulator's value, and 3 became the current value's value, which if you add turns up to 11, and so on. Finally, when you add 11 with the last element of the array, it gives you 15. So that's the reduce method. We have only added these two variables. You can basically do anything you want on each of your array elements from left to right. Now again, if you don't have Node.js installed, we will simply copy and paste it in our browser console, and it should give us the same result. That's all. I hope you have enjoyed and learned something from this video. If so, please give it a thumbs up. If not, please leave in comments how I can make it better. Thank you and goodbye.